Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They came for his land with fake maps, drones, and six-figure fines. But Trevor Grant didn't spend 20 years off-grid in the Rockies just to be bullied by a clipboard and a smile. This isn't a quiet tale of mountain solitude. It's a war for freedom fought with fire, grit, and a rifle. They say silence is golden, but up here in the Rockies, it's platinum. My name's Trevor Grant. I'm 46 years old, and for the past 2 decades, I've been living off-grid on 15 acres of heaven I carved out of the Colorado mountains. No neighbors, no noise, no bureaucracy breathing down my neck. Just me, the pines, and the slow, honest rhythm of the land. It wasn't always like this. I used to be a software engineer, 12-hour shifts, synthetic light, corporate jargon dripping like battery acid into every conversation. I burned out before I hit 30. I remember the exact moment it snapped. I was on a Zoom call about reducing latency in synergistic data structures, while my dinner sat cold next to me and my third cup of coffee went stale. That night, I tendered my resignation and never looked back. I spent every cent I had on this land. Back in 2003, it wasn't much, just rough terrain, old forest, and one half-collapsed hunting shack that smelled like bear and mold. But to me, it was possibility. Over time, I built everything with my own 2 hands. The cabin, the solar rig, the water catchment, the raised garden beds, the outhouse, with the best mountain view in North America, if I say so myself. My generator's reliable, my chickens lay daily, and I fish in the Alpine Lake half a mile from my front door. My only link to the outside world is a satellite radio, a weatherproof postbox halfway down the trail, and a diesel-guzzling off-roader I use maybe once a month when I need supplies or have a dental emergency. I didn't come here to run from the law or to write manifestos in a cave. I came here to live right. No streaming, no social media, no HOA telling me what color to stain my porch. My taxes are paid. My land is registered. My cabin is code compliant, inspected before I ever turned in the blueprints. I'm not a ghost. I just live like one, and I love it. Every morning, I wake to birdsong and the crackle of my wood stove. I drink coffee brewed in a cast iron percolator and split logs to keep warm. At night, it's just stars and the long, slow howl of wind across the ridge. I don't miss much, except maybe cold beer on tap and the occasional cheeseburger that doesn't taste like campfire smoke. I didn't think peace had an expiration date. I believed if I stayed on my land, minded my business, and kept to myself, the world would keep out. But I was wrong. Everything changed one spring morning when a mailbox that hadn't seen action in weeks coughed up something that didn't belong. An official-looking envelope smudged with mud, the return address stamped with 3 terrifying letters. HOA. I stood in the middle of my one-room cabin, envelope in hand, heart thudding like I'd just spotted a cougar on the ridge. HOA. My eyes scanned the return address again. Pine Hill Estates Homeowners Association. That meant nothing to me. I wasn't in any estates. I was 20 miles up a gravel cutback, off the edge of anything resembling planned development. But the letter felt real. Too real. Inside, it was worse. A formal notice typed in government-perfect block font, like the IRS and DMV, had teamed up to ruin my morning. Dear Mr. Grant Audit, our records indicate an outstanding balance of $147,180 in unpaid HOA dues, accrued over a period of 20 years, including late fees, administrative penalties, and legal review surcharges. You are hereby instructed to present yourself at the Pine Hill Estates HOA office within 10 business days. Failure to comply will result in civil action and potential lien on property. I read it twice, mouth dry. $147,000. For what? Living peacefully. There was no way this was real, but my gut said otherwise. I threw on my old flannel, grabbed the emergency folder with my deed and land records, and fueled up my truck. The drive down the mountain took nearly an hour. Potholes the size of bathtubs, one overturned pine I had to chainsaw in half, and a washed-out creek crossing I hadn't used since last year's thaw. But nothing was stopping me now. Not until I figured out who had the gall to send that envelope. The town had changed since I was last there. A new gas station, a health food cafe where the bait shop used to be, and a bunch of shiny Range Rovers parked outside what I recognized, begrudgingly, as the Pine Hill Estates Welcome Center. It looked like a ski resort, and a tech startup had a baby. Big beams, clean lines, too much glass for a building in snow country. Inside, it was worse. A young woman behind the counter blinked at me as I stomped in, still covered in road dust. "You're Trevor Grant?" she asked, tapping a tablet. "Apparently public enemy number one," I replied. She didn't laugh. She handed me a printed dossier, thick enough to choke a goose. "This is your account record, sir. You've been listed as a non-compliant member since 2003. I opened it and felt my blood run cold. There it was. Lot 119A, North Slope region. Coordinates matched my cabin's parcel. According to their maps, my land was now part of Pine Hill Estates Phase 4 expansion, a planned luxury subdivision that was still under transition. "Who gave you the right to include my property?" I demanded. "Boundary reallocation occurred in 2013, she said blandly, reading from a screen. "All lots within the new perimeter were absorbed under Provisional Charter Authority as per the Regional Community Overlay adopted by the county." "What the hell does that even mean?" I snapped. "I never signed anything. I didn't vote. I didn't even get a flyer." She offered a shrug. "If you believe there's been an error, you may appeal through our Dispute Resolution Board. They meet once a quarter. Next availability is August." It was April. That's when I saw it on the wall behind her, a framed map labeled Pine Hill Estates Expansion Zone. And sure enough, there was my little patch of forest in bright HOA blue, like it had always belonged to them. I walked out without another word, got in my truck, and just sat there. My palms were sweating, my stomach churned. Somehow, in my 20 years of solitude, someone had drawn a line around my land, slapped a fake membership number on it, and was now demanding 6 figures for the privilege of pretending I lived in suburbia. It wasn't just an error, it was a setup. And I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. The first sign that things were escalating from bureaucratic stupidity to full-on siege warfare came 3 days after that cursed visit to the HOA office. It started with a drone. I was gutting trout by the fire pit behind my cabin when I heard the distinct mosquito whine of a quadcopter. I looked up expecting maybe a Forest Service ranger, but no. This thing had a glossy white casing, a blinking camera mounted underneath, and a Pine Hill Estates sticker slapped right on its side. It hovered just 20 feet above my roof, buzzing like a nosy wasp, sweeping back and forth like it was scanning for targets. I shouted at it, flipped at the bird. It hovered higher, spun, and zipped away over the tree line. I stood there, fish guts on my hands, heart pounding. The next day, it got worse. I was chopping wood near the chicken coop when I heard tires on gravel, unauthorized tires. I turned and saw a black SUV crawling up my access road like a tick on a hound. No license plate on the front, just a laminated sign in the window. HOA Field Compliance Unit. 3 people stepped out like they were storming the beaches. Polo shirts, khakis, clipboards. One of them carried a laser measuring tool. Another had a camera with a telephoto lens so big it looked like he was trying to photograph wildlife from orbit. I met them halfway down the hill, axe still in hand. "You lost?" I asked, trying not to grit my teeth. "We're here for a compliance assessment, Mr. Grant," said the lead guy, a doughy man with mirrored sunglasses and the voice of someone who'd never chopped wood in his life. "On whose authority?" I barked. "The Pine Hill Estates Community Standards Council," he said, handing me a carbon-copied inspection notice like he was delivering pizza. "You've refused to respond to our communication, so we've initiated field verification for the purpose of penalty calculation and enforcement proceedings." "Let me make this simple," I said, stepping forward, voice low. "You are on private land. You're not welcome. You have 60 seconds to leave before I call the sheriff, or start counting rounds." The camera guy raised his lens again. The other one began walking toward my solar rig, writing something in a notebook. That's when the old me, the version who used to nod politely in conference rooms while dying inside, finally died for good. I fired a single round from my Winchester into the air. The effect was immediate. The camera guy dove behind the car. The clipboard woman screamed and bolted back to the SUV. The leader held up both hands and shouted, "Whoa! Whoa! There's no need for violence. There's also no need for trespassing," I snapped. Off my mountain. They left skid marks in the dirt all the way back down the hill. I spent the rest of the day coiled tighter than a rattlesnake in a mailbox. That night, I barely slept. I kept the rifle loaded, one eye open, ears tuned for tires, rotors, or jackboots in the dark. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. There's a difference. But the next blow didn't come under cover of darkness. It came the following morning, in broad daylight, in the form of Sarah Doyle herself. I saw the Lexus before I saw her. It climbed my hill like it owned the road, humming smugly. Then she stepped out, crisp white blouse, hair coiled like a noose, aviator glasses glinting. She carried a leather folio and a look that said she'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. "You must be Mr. Grant," she said, like we were old friends. "You're trespassing," I replied, rifle in plain view across my back. She didn't flinch. "Consider this a courtesy visit. I wanted to give you a personal heads up before we proceed with legal collection. You see, now that you've refused access to our inspectors, you've triggered a Tier 3 violation clause. Is that right?" I asked. "And what exactly does Tier 3 get me? A drone strike?" She smiled, as if I'd complimented her. "No, Mr. Grant," she said sweetly. "Tier 3 allows us to initiate lien processing and, if necessary, schedule your property for sheriff's auction. We've already begun preliminary valuation. Lovely little place. The solar array's outdated, but salvageable." I took a step forward. "You try to auction this land," I said, voice steel, "and I'll make national news. You understand me." "Let's not be dramatic," she said. "You're part of this community whether you like it or not. You're simply late to the party." She turned, perfectly calm, and got back into her car. As the dust trailed behind her down the mountain, I stood frozen on my own land, violated, enraged, and no longer under any illusion. This wasn't mismanagement. It wasn't incompetence. This was a hostile takeover. There's a moment in every fight where the fear burns off and leaves only purpose. That moment hit me around 3 a.m., 2 nights after Sarah Doyle tried to smile me off my own land. I hadn't slept. I sat at the edge of my bed, boots still on, staring at the folder of fake documents they'd handed me, maps with manipulated borders, dues calculations with retroactive penalties, and one particularly bold intent to lien form with my name spelled wrong. That was the moment when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war, and I wasn't going to win it with an axe and a rifle alone. I dug out the fireproof lockbox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the original 2003 purchase documents, the county-issued topographic parcel maps, and something I never thought I'd need again, the worn business card of Jessica Collins, former military JAG, now a bulldog land rights attorney in Durango. We hadn't spoken since a messy mutual friend's wedding in 2008, but I knew one thing about Jess. She didn't lose. I climbed into the truck, shotgun behind the seat, and made the 4-hour journey down the switchbacks, through a storm, and into the quiet pulse of small-town law. When I walked into her office and slapped the folder on her desk, she didn't even ask how I'd found her. "Trouble found you, huh?" she said, flipping through the documents. "You could say that." Jess read silently for a few minutes, then let out a slow whistle. "This isn't just property overreach," she said. "This is organized fraud wrapped in HOA branding. If half of this is legit, we're talking federal crimes." She started making calls before I even finished my coffee. Within 48 hours, she'd pulled in a cadastral surveyor, a forensic document analyst, and a retired judge who owed her one from a boundary rights appeal in 2015. We drove out to my land that weekend. Her, the surveyor, and a very confused drone tech she borrowed from a local university. They mapped every inch of my property from the sky and compared it to historical records and county filings. The result? My land had never been legally included in any HOA jurisdiction. Not once. Not even close. But here's the kicker. Jess discovered that sometime around 2013, a Phase 4 expansion map was quietly slipped into county planning records, unsigned, unverified, and never actually approved. It simply sat there, assumed to be accurate by every lazy bureaucrat downstream. And that one forged map had been used to build an entire lie. Worse yet, that lie wasn't just about borders. As Jess dug into financial disclosures, she found grant applications filed by Pine Hill Estates listing me, by name, as an off-grid compliance partner. They'd received tens of thousands in federal funding for community solar implementation and resilience testing that allegedly involved my property. Let me repeat that. They used my name and land to get government money without ever notifying me, compensating me, or even admitting I existed. By Monday, Jess had filed a restraining order against further contact from HOA agents. By Wednesday, she submitted a formal request to halt all collection activity and invalidate the lien notice as fraudulent. On Friday, we submitted our case to the district court, and with it, a 93-page complaint citing trespass, attempted fraud, property defamation, harassment, falsification of public records, and conspiracy to commit land seizure. And that wasn't all. Jess filed a parallel request with the Office of the Inspector General to audit Pine Hill Estate's use of federal grant money. If even a fraction of her findings held up, it wouldn't just be a civil suit, it'd be a criminal case. For the first time in weeks, I felt something break through the fog of rage and helplessness. Clarity. They wanted a fight. They just got one. The courtroom was cold. Too cold. Maybe they cranked up the AC for drama, or maybe it was just me. But as I sat beside Jess at the plaintiff's table, hands clenched, boots dusted from the trail that morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Focus like a blade. The judge was a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Reyes. Former federal prosecutor, no tolerance for theatrics, nonsense, or stalling. Her gaze alone could peel paint. She called our case, Grant v. Pine Hill Estates HOA et al., and the room shifted. You could feel the tension coil around the benches like a rattler in the rafters. Across from us sat Sarah Doyle in a sleek gray suit that probably cost more than my solar array. Flanked by two HOA lawyers with smug smiles and thick binders, she looked like she still thought she was in control. That wouldn't last. Jess opened strong. She laid out our timeline with military precision, showed the original deed, the county-verified parcel maps, photos from our drone survey, satellite overlays. Then came the forged Phase 4 expansion map, slipped into planning archives without date, author, or approval signature. Your Honor, Jess said, pacing with the map projected behind her, this document has as much legal authority as a cocktail napkin. Judge Reyes raised an eyebrow. Is the defense prepared to explain how such a map came to define jurisdiction over land it never legally included? One of the HOA attorneys stood. Your Honor, we believe Mr. Grant's parcel was included in good faith based on interpretive boundary documentation. Jess cut him off like a guillotine. Interpretive? You mean imaginary, because the county assessor's office never updated the parcel registry. No notification was filed, no vote held, no legal annexation process initiated. This was a phantom expansion designed to make an independent property look like a delinquent HOA member. And it worked, until Mr. Grant fired a warning shot into the sky and came to me. The judge stared over her glasses. Warning shot? Figurative, Your Honor, Jess said, smiling like a shark. Then came the big guns. The fraud trail. Jess handed over federal grant applications filed by Pine Hill Estates, documents signed by Sarah Doyle, listing my name and property as part of a community resilience pilot zone. They claimed I had adopted HOA guidelines voluntarily, provided data from off-grid testing, and, get this, attended monthly sustainability calls. I hadn't made a phone call longer than 3 minutes in 10 years. When Jess showed bank transfers from the grant funds to community improvement projects that coincidentally aligned with Doyle's personal home renovation, the air changed. You could feel the ground shift under their table. But the final blow. Jess called the county GIS director to the stand. He confirmed that Pine Hill Estates had submitted multiple altered boundary maps over the past decade. All unofficial, all accidentally, accepted by underfunded clerks who never cross-checked parcel records. That was no accident, the director said, wiping sweat from his forehead. That was a calculated manipulation. When Sarah Doyle was finally called to testify, the room hushed. She stood there, hands clasped, fake calm painted across her face. Jess grilled her like a steak left too long in the sun. Can you explain why Mr. Grant's name appears on these reports? I don't recall. You signed these. They were prepared by staff. Did you authorize the valuation team to enter his property? I was told it was within our rights. Even after he presented a deed, showing otherwise, I was under the impression. Jess raised her voice, sharp now. Are you in the habit of taking federal money based on impressions, Ms. Doyle? Sarah's mask cracked, just a hairline fracture, but I saw it. And so did the judge. After closing arguments, Judge Reyes didn't even ask for recess. She returned 10 minutes later with her verdict like thunder in a clear sky. This court finds that the HOA acted with willful negligence, malicious intent, and fraudulent purpose. All claims against Mr. Grant are dismissed. The lien is vacated. The boundary claims are invalidated. The Pine Hill Estates HOA is hereby referred for federal investigation into misappropriation of funds, unlawful expansion of jurisdiction, and falsification of public records. Gasps, audible gasps, and mez. Doyle, the judge added, voice now ice. You are ordered into immediate custody, pending arraignment on multiple counts of fraud. Bailiffs moved in. Sarah's face went pale. One of the attorneys tried to stand. Jess silenced him with a single look. As they cuffed her and led her out past us, she turned her head, eyes wide with disbelief, as if this was somehow still happening to someone else. But it wasn't. It was happening to her, because justice out here in the mountains comes slow. But when it does, it hits like an avalanche. The dust hadn't even settled in the courtroom when the first domino fell. Sarah Doyle, now a former HOA president and current inmate awaiting federal indictment, was escorted out in handcuffs, her silk blouse clashing hilariously with the zip ties around her wrists. Her attorneys tried to suppress the footage, but it made the local news anyway. HOA president arrested for fraud, property theft, and federal grant misuse. It aired between the weather and a segment about new bike lanes. The irony wasn't lost on me. The fallout was fast and wide. The Pine Hill Estates HOA, once the pride of realtors and a model of planned serenity, collapsed within a week. The court's ruling froze their accounts, and the audit Jess triggered brought in the feds like wasps to a busted hive. Turns out Sarah hadn't been acting alone. Her vice president, Tom Keever, a former insurance adjuster with a God complex, was arrested 2 days later for helping fabricate resident compliance reports. Another board member, who also happened to be Sarah's cousin, tried to flee the state but got picked up at a bus station in Utah with a suitcase full of HOA cash and 3 burner phones. Classy. The county commission, humiliated by how easily they'd been manipulated, launched an emergency review of every HOA map filed in the past 15 years. Turns out, Pine Hill Estates wasn't the only group playing fast and loose with lines on a map. My case opened the floodgates. Meanwhile, the residents of Pine Hill Estates, the ones who'd smugly enforced fence height regulations and issued fines for non-neutral mailbox paint, now found themselves under scrutiny. Some were just blind followers, others complicit. At least 5 homeowners filed lawsuits against the former HOA for extortion and unlawful lien placements. One couple, the Barneses, had nearly lost their home after being fined $400 a day for unauthorized garden gnomes. They called me a hero. I told them to get louder gnomes. Jess naturally became a local legend. Her inbox overflowed with land rights cases from across the state. She turned down every news outlet but one podcast where she described Sarah Doyle as a paper tyrant with a clipboard and no moral compass. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. And me. The court awarded $680,000 in compensatory and punitive damages. I accepted half with one condition, that my land be formally and permanently registered in the county records as a sovereign non-governing parcel. No HOA, no annexation, no zoning manipulations. The judge agreed and made it binding. The rest of the money? I donated to a legal defense fund for victims of HOA abuse. People who got bulldozed like I almost did, just quieter. But money wasn't the real reward. It was the silence. It was waking up without wondering who might be photographing my compost bin. It was standing on my porch with a cup of hot coffee, watching a bald eagle circle the lake, knowing no one, not Sarah, not a clipboard warrior, not a drone pilot, could ever touch my life again. Word spread. Backpackers started calling my area the No HOA zone. One guy painted it on a trail sign in faded red letters. I left it there. And Sarah? Last I heard, she was awaiting sentencing. Her plea deal required her to name every accomplice, every forged signature, every misused dollar. Jess said the list read like a gated community social club. Justice came, not with vengeance, but with weight. Real, measured, cold as mountain air. Some call it retribution. I call it balance restored. It was late October when I finally let myself exhale, the kind of exhale you feel in your spine. The air had that bite only a mountain autumn could bring. Crisp, pine-scented, sharp enough to make you grateful for every lungful. I was sitting by the fire pit behind the cabin, a cast-iron pot of coffee bubbling over the flames, the stars so bright it felt like I could reach up and pluck one out for a lantern. To my right, my old Winchester rested against a log, not out of fear anymore, but habit. To my left, on a mismatched camp chair, sat Jess, holding a tin of the worst oatmeal cookies I'd ever tasted. She'd baked them herself, with enthusiasm. "They taste like insulation foam," I told her, chewing heroically. "That's bold talk from a man who used tree bark as tea," she shot back, grinning. We both laughed. That night, we'd gathered a small group: Sheriff Mark, the Barneses, and their revenge gnomes, even the drone kid from the survey crew. A pot of chili simmered. Someone brought a banjo. I still don't know who. At some point, a neighbor from 2 valleys over told a story about trapping raccoons with Nutella and classical music. None of it made sense, but everyone laughed until they cried. And there, between spoonfuls of smoky chili and badly tuned renditions of "Take Me Home, Country Roads," something healed. Not just the land, not just my name, me. For years, I'd thought solitude was the answer to everything, and maybe it was, for a time. But that night showed me something else. Freedom doesn't mean shutting the world out. It means choosing who you let in. At some point, someone hung a wooden sign near my trailhead, still there today. Carved into it, in rough letters, "Private property, no drones, no HOA, cookies optional." It's become a bit of a local landmark. Hikers stop and take photos. Someone even left a gingerbread man at the base. I didn't have the heart to throw it out. Probably cursed, but endearing. I still live alone, still catch trout, still split wood before breakfast. But now, sometimes, I drive down to town and have a beer with the folks who stood by me. The ones who saw what was happening and didn't flinch. Justice was never just about beating Sarah Doyle. It was about drawing a line and making damn sure no one crosses it again, not without a warrant and maybe a cookie.